yourself to a water or a coffee at the refreshment table. Bathrooms can be found a very long way down this hallway through 2 sets of doors, and keep walking. Emergency exits are the door you came in and this double door immediately to my left. And at the back, you'll find our membership and merchandise tables. We absolutely encourage everyone to visit and to learn how they can support the movement directly. Every voice, every action, and every Albertan supporter is vital. We will be having a full question and answer at the end of the evening. If you're shy and don't wish to use the microphone, there are cards at the membership table. Please feel to go back there, write down your question, and we'll make sure that it's brought forward on your behalf. This evening, we feature 2 very powerful speakers, sharing insight into a future for Alberta. During the presentations, we kindly ask that you first please hold your questions. There will be a full question and answer session at the end, and please, no disruptions. We're here for respectful discussion and learning. In fairness to our volunteers, to our guests, and to our presenters, we will absolutely ask any problem individuals to leave. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way, I'll introduce myself. I'm David Goff, this evening's MC. I am absolutely proud to stand before you as a supporter of this project and someone who is deeply passionate about the mission to achieve a successful referendum on Alberta independence and prosperity. For those of you in the audience who are new, the Alberta Prosperity Project is a nonpartisan, nonprofit educational society. The mission is to educate, to inspire, and to advocate on the benefits of freedom and prosperity through independence for all Albertans. The movement began in May 2021 in a humble oil field shop in Nisku, Alberta, where a group of Albertans, tired of ineffectiveness of our provincial leadership and the overreach from Ottawa, decided it was time to act. And out of those humble beginnings, the Alberta Prosperity Project was born. And here we are this evening. We begin our meetings with a non-denominational prayer, taking a moment to reflect and unify. I'd like to welcome to the microphone Carlos Yonaloinas to formally open this evening's presentation and deliver tonight's blessing.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are gathered here today as your children in the land of Alberta to discuss things that will help us to learn thine will for what you would have us do with this land that has been graciously given to us from thee. Father, there are many questions here in the audience, many people who have come here seeking answers or seeking others. We ask that thine Spirit might guide the speakers so that they may be able to answer their questions and bring peace to their hearts. We ask for this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Carlos. Let us begin. Our first speaker is Dr. Dennis Modry. Dr. Modry is a cardiothoracic surgeon and critical care specialist who started and directed Western Canada's first heart and lung transplantation program. During his 32 years in practice, he also served on the Finance Committee of successive provincial Conservative governments since the Getty era. He is a founding member and chair of the Alberta Prosperity Society and Alberta Prosperity Project. He is a fiscal conservative, a student of the Canadian Constitution, and is here to speak to us on the benefits of provincial sovereignty. Please welcome Dr. Dennis Modry.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and wow, it's wonderful to see so many people here. I hope that if anybody's standing at the back, I think there are a few chairs up here that and scattered about so that nobody has to stand. Now, before I get going, I have 2 tasks. One is I need to acknowledge our many volunteers. This is our 72nd or 73rd town hall in the last 5.5 months or so. And it wouldn't be possible to pull these off if it wasn't for our volunteers. So please give them a warm round of applause. The second point that I want to make is to introduce a video that some of you have probably seen, but for those who haven't, this is a video that was created by Jim Ferguson from Scotland. We had no idea that it was being prepared, but we were very pleasantly surprised to receive it. And Jim Ferguson started an organization called Freedom Train International, which galvanizes the freedom lovers in countries around the world that are seeking the same kind of freedom and sovereignty and self-determination that many other people in other regions want as well. It's quite poignant when he points out, now the only reason I'm telling you this is some of you may have trouble understanding his Scottish accent, but one of the things that is quite poignant is when he points out that freedom-loving people around the world are pulling for us. They're wanting Alberta to be successful in its quest for sovereignty as a beacon of hope and a pathway to sovereignty for them as well to follow. So without further ado, let's show the video.
The die is set, but Alberta ain't ready to kneel just yet. They chose their king, their power was met, but we don't answer to Ottawa yet. No crown gave us what we've earned, just dirt and fire and lessons learned. Now the ground it shakes, the steel it groans, and Alberta walks alone. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands, never on its knees. A nation born in the forge of the free. From the rigs to the rails, the crops to the code, we lit their streets, we bore their load. They laughed at pride, they mocked the West, but freedom don't die, it just waits for the test. The cowboys ride, the farmers rise, 5 million strong under open skies. No leash, no lie, no foreign throne. This land is steel and it stands alone. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands, never on its knees. A nation born in the forge of the free. Can't kill the mountain, can't drown the plain, can't burn the spirit that won't be chained. He stares down east with a calloused hand and says, this time we draw the line in the land. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands, never on its
Like everybody like that. Great, wonderful. All right, so to begin, let's go. How many people here this evening are at an Alberta Prosperity Project event for the very first time? Please raise your hand. Wonderful, that's great. All right, next question. How many people who are here, obviously, because I can't be talking to somebody who's outside, how many people tonight are already on the independence train and would like Alberta to become a sovereign country? Okay, great. So the majority of you. Now, it's legitimate not to be on the independence train. How many people are not yet on the independence train and are here for more information before making that decision? There's a couple people? All right, well, that's good. Because what we're hoping for is by the end of the evening, after I've spoken and Mitch has spoken, we've answered questions, that you will have enough information to make an informed choice as to what you want for yourself, your family, your retirement, and future generations. So, now with that, how many people that are here tonight were at the rally? Wow, there's quite a few people at the rally. Fantastic. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about Alberta sovereignty, right? And we're talking about it for many, many reasons. How many people were pleased with the outcome of the federal election? So Max raises his hand. He always does that. He raises his hand. He's French-Canadian. He hardly knows what he's talking about. Just kidding. He's a great guy. But you know, it's interesting because for people who are not, or rather who are pleased with the outcome of the federal election, that's a choice because you know those individuals are very happy to be overgoverned, overregulated, and overtaxed, and they want more of it. So that's what's coming with Mr. Carney. And but then there are other people that are happy with the outcome of the federal election because they knew it would stimulate the sovereignty movement, and it sure has done that. All right, so now, how many read Mr. Carney's book on values? There's a few, okay. Well, I'll give you a précis of it from Peter Foster's interpretation of what Peter Foster is a brilliant columnist with the National Post. And he did a deep dive into it in 2021 when the book came out, and then he did an update again this January. And it's interesting to sort of contemplate the notion that Mr. Carney has that Western civilization is morally rotten and corrupted by capitalism, which has led to a climate emergency. And that's just one perspective, but what really gets to everybody, to the heart of everybody's life, is that he believes that in order to control this, there must be rigid, in other words, to control the climate, if that's even possible, that there must be rigid controls on individual freedoms, on business aligned with the oil and gas industry, and on institutions that finance those industries. And he says that he does not promise that life will be better for ordinary people. In fact, fewer choices, less travel, less meat, more inconvenience, and more poverty. So already when you're thinking about this, that doesn't sound like anything that most people in Canada, but certainly the majority of people in Albertans would not like to see. But he goes on to say that he acknowledges that assets will be stranded, that you won't be able to sell your used internal combustion engine vehicle, and that buildings will become unrentable, unusable. And this is a dystopian future that he expects to achieve with two things, because right out of the World Economic Forum playbook is the whole concept of a digital ID to track your every movement. But then if he gets his way, and he says we've heard him say this, that he's not necessarily going to do this, but implement, and he's a central banker, remember, a programmable digital currency, which if you were concerned about sending $10 to the trucker convoy and you had your accounts frozen, you can just imagine what may happen when you are completely tracked and your behavior in terms of environmental, social, and governance issues is monitored, and if you're not compliant with them, how they'll be able to control you through not only the digital ID, but that central bank digital currency. And he expects to carry on the legacy of Liberal government forever, because he wants to lower the voting age to 16, for one thing, and if you're 16 and you vote Liberal in the first round, that the first time you're able to vote, you're inclined to vote Liberal for the rest of your life, because it will be cemented when you're 17 and you qualify for $2,000 a month from a universal basic income. So what incentive does somebody who's 17 have to carry on with their education or to learn a trade or a skill if you're already being paid to do nothing? So these are very significant concerns for people like all of you who are here tonight, who have worked to eke out a living and to be able to plan for your retirement. And we're seeing how your retirement, for those who are retired and for those who are contemplating retirement, how it's becoming more and more difficult to make ends meet. And it may become impossible. And you've seen the latest budget that's been proposed. Over the next 4 years, it'll add another $250 million to the deficit, or to the debt, which means we're going to go from 1.3 to 1.5 or 6 trillion dollar debt. And how's that going to get paid? Where's it going to come from? So you can imagine that it's going to come from us through increased taxation, regulatory costs, etc. All right, so when you analyze Alberta's history now, and you understand the Constitution, you can then start to understand how we got here and why nothing can change. And so I'm going to give you a brief recap of how it is we got to this particular point. And it really started back in 1904. But it was in September 1, 1905, that most of you will remember that Alberta and Saskatchewan were incorporated into Canada, and that was due to the efforts of Sir Clifford Sifton. He was the Minister of the Interior in the Liberal government of Sir Wilfrid Laurier. But it's what he said to an audience in Winnipeg. It's what he said to an audience in Winnipeg in 2004, before Alberta and Saskatchewan joined, that was prescient, and it helps to explain how we got to where we are at now. What he said, and this is a quote from his book, Clifford Sifton, Volume 2, page 95, for those who like to check up on things, is this. He said, "We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies is Alberta and Saskatchewan's wealth, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our people in the East, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way contribute to its prosperity." Did you hear anything about the prosperity of the West in that statement? No, and it's nowhere in his book either. So the point is that we started off as a colony to serve the interests of the East, and here it is, 120 years later, and we're still a colony, and we're still being pillaged and plundered for our wealth, and we're having values driven down our throat that do not align with those Judeo-Christian values which were foundational to the development of Western civilization, civil society, and the rule of law, and our individual freedoms and rights. And we're seeing how this is impacting us now. Now, if we look at the monetary aspect of what has happened to us, let's just consider four things. Equalization, which started in 1957, but we were affected adversely since 1963. The national energy policy implemented in 1980. Other confiscatory tax policies and regulatory costs, which is something that most of us don't consider because they're hidden. But if you look at it together, over that period of time till now, we've given $1 trillion plus to Ottawa. We haven't received a cent in return. So keep that in mind. Now, I want to make a comment about the national energy policy. And as you know, subsequent to 1980, Alberta was devastated. When we were booming just before the national energy policy came out, Alberta became Well, it was just simply devastated. Businesses went under, businesses relocated, businesses coned down their operation, people lost their homes, people committed suicide. It was a mess for the next 15 years or so. Now, when Marc Lalonde was asked the question, why did you implement the national energy policy, he said this. He said, because we could not let Alberta become the center of economic power in Canada. So I want you to keep that thought in mind because it ties right back to the way in which Alberta and Saskatchewan were joined Confederation in 1905. And just think about what I said, what Clifford Sifton said, for the benefit of the East, right? And it's the same thing now. You need to understand that the federal government will never permit self-determination in Alberta, will never permit Alberta to become the center of economic power in Canada because the Eastern Laurentians, the Federalists, will never allow that to happen because they're benefiting from the largesse that we provide to them through excessive taxation. All right, so now let's look at something more current, just to cement this whole idea. As the Premier has pointed out, and as the Canadian taxpayer has pointed out, Canadian Taxpayer Federation, has pointed out, is that in the last 10 years, $500 billion, the Canadian Taxpayer Federation figures at $630 billion, but nevertheless, over $500 billion of planned investment into Alberta didn't occur. And why didn't it occur? Because the investors, whether they were local or foreign, couldn't see a business case to make those financial commitments. They couldn't see a business case. Why is that? Because of federal regulation and taxation. And to cement this idea further, let's look at GDP per capita growth in all industrialized countries in the world, okay? In the last 10 years, where do you think Alberta lined up when you compare all countries, all industrialized countries, economic growth per capita? Where do you think Canada was? Dead last. Dead last at 1.4% over 10 years. That's abysmal. Why? Federal regulation and taxation. It's really not complicated. That is why it has occurred. So the solution then for us is what? What can we do here? Well, if we know we can't change the Constitution, if we know that we don't have leverage with the federal government, and we've never had leverage, then we have only one solution left. If we can't get leverage any other way through negotiations, then the only other solution is for Alberta to become a sovereign country. But let me put a sharp point on something, and that is it possible to change the Constitution? It isn't. It is not possible. And I want you to understand that Confederation was set up exactly the way it is working right now. The way the federal government operates right now, we do not have representation by population in the House of Commons. For example, PEI gets one member of parliament for every 39,000 population. Alberta, one for every 130,000 population. In the Senate, it's no better. We don't have regional, nor do we have regional representation by population, and we don't even have regional representation, period. So for example, Alberta and BC account for 25% of the population. We have 11% of the Senate seats. And we have no control over how the Supreme Court is nominated either. So we have a difficult situation that we're in, and we don't have leverage. We cannot solve the imbalance in power between the federal government and the provincial government, and that's the way it has been for 120 years. Now, some provincial governments have been able to come to some sort of a meeting of the minds, but we continue to be subjugated, dominated, exploited, and our self-determination inhibited by this federal government. So let's look at sovereignty now. And the term sovereignty means different things to different people, but what does it actually mean? And let's talk about that terminology for a moment. Sovereignty in its highest form of expression is ultimate power and control. So for example, God is sovereign, there's nothing above God. At a more elementary level, sovereignty means self-governance, freedom from external interference. What sovereignty is not is a right or a left issue politically. Sovereignty benefits everybody, no matter your political stripe, no matter whether you're a union member or a non-union member, no matter your race, your religion, it benefits everybody. There are no losers in Alberta becoming a sovereign country. Now, sovereignty is also freedom from persecution. And when I say freedom from persecution, what do I mean? I mean freedom from political persecution, economic persecution, cultural and religious persecution, regulatory persecution, and one that you'll all remember not too long ago called medical persecution. Now, I want you to think about the pursuit of sovereignty as noble, because it is noble to pursue self-determination. It is noble to pursue your goals and your aspirations. It is noble to pursue freedom and prosperity. And it is noble in a Constitution of Alberta for the enshrinement, if you will, of your individual freedoms and rights in a way in which they can never be wrest asunder. So now, let's think of sovereignty at the individual level. Think of each one of you as a sovereign individual, all right? And you have no regulation and no taxation. All of a sudden, you have a little regulation. Then you have a little bit of taxation. Then you have a little bit more regulation. Then you have more taxation. And eventually, you become so over-regulated and overtaxed, you need a permit almost to do anything, because everything is regulated and controlled. And all of a sudden, you are taxed at such a level that it is really difficult to make ends meet. And if we consider taxation from a historic perspective, 1910, Alberta, 6%. 1950, 18%. 2010, 33%. And now it's 43%. That is your average tax rate now. So, given the debt, where do you think taxes are going? Right, you're going to be even more compromised, right? They're going to print more money, and that's going to devalue your dollar and devalue your purchasing power as well. So let's look at the sovereignty from the perspective of the provincial government. You'll recall when the UCP government was elected, they introduced Bill 1, the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act. There's that term sovereignty again. Why did they introduce that act? They introduced it for a very simple reason, that they wanted to have some legislative ability to push back against federal overreach and federal usurpation of provincial constitutional authority. And in what areas? Well, in areas of oil and gas, development and transportation, in agriculture, censorship, and on property rights, and we've seen it being played out with firearms most recently. So what has happened, though, as a result of the concerns in these particular areas? Well, the federal government has launched 18 lawsuits against in those 4 areas that I've just said, because they haven't been able to effectively deal with the federal government. They have no darn leverage. And they're doing the same thing that every provincial government has done historically. When Albertans don't get what we want, when the Alberta government doesn't get what it wants, it resorts to the only thing that it can, and that is to launch a lawsuit. And ultimately, those things are adjudicated at the level of the Supreme Court, and what happens? We lose all the time. And even when we won on Bill C-69. What did the federal government do? Bill C-69 is the pipeline ban, if you will. And we won that at the level of the Supreme Court, surprise, surprise. But the federal government ignored it, and they're changing the legislation so that Bill C-69 can actually exist. Nevertheless, the difficulty that we find ourselves in as a result of all of this is we have no choice if we want to get out from under federal control and federal oppression so that we can thrive. Now, I want you to think about the benefit. As a sovereign Alberta, what does it mean? It means we're completely out from under all federal regulation and taxation. So imagine how that impacts you. So let's just go through it for a second. We give about $70 to $75 billion to Ottawa every year through our taxes. Those through not just federal taxes, but all of the other taxes, fuel tax, GST, consumption taxes, it's whatever. And there's a whole bunch of them, and Mitch will show you the list. When you're out from all of those, now what are we left with? We're left with what we have in Alberta right now, a provincial income tax of 10%. That's what we have, provincially. Corporate tax is 23%, so we'd be able to reduce that to 12 to 15%, all right? So there we are right now in a sovereign Alberta, just by doing that alone. If you're making $100,000 a year and you're taxed at 43%, you are instantly at 10%, right there. But over time, because of the fiscal capacity surplus, what else happens is that we would be able to eventually eliminate that personal income tax. In addition to that, we would be able to eliminate property tax. Now, we have to be cognizant of the fact that subsequent to a successful referendum, and we have this in our Value of Freedom document, it's going to be something that has to be discussed in a constitutional conference. So the combination of how you can dramatically reduce your tax burden and everything that you buy is devoid of tax as well, then you can understand that we have to balance getting rid of the federal tax and regulatory costs. They're gone, but we have to figure out exactly what will happen with the elimination of provincial income tax, even if it's at 10%. Should there be a 5% or so consumption tax or not? And the elimination of property tax. And of course, it's a no-brainer to reduce the corporate tax to 12 or 15% either. The point is that when you have the financial means to better support yourself and better support your family and to plan for your retirement, that's what sovereignty will mean to you. It means that you are putting your family first ahead of being corrupted, not being corrupted, but ahead of being oppressed by a corrupt federal government. This is how you can benefit. Notwithstanding the fact that you have far more freedoms and you're never going to be constrained by being able to travel or to purchase an internal combustion engine vehicle or to eat 2 steaks a week if you want, that kind of thing. This is the sort of thing that we need to get out from under the tyranny that's coming at us if we do nothing. Now, I want to touch on a couple of other things. Some of you will know that we've been to the U.S. We've met with the U.S. administration twice, April the 22nd this year and on September the 29th. And I also want to touch on the meeting that was requested by the Parti Québécois from Quebec to meet with us in the 3rd week of September. So now, we were delighted to have the opportunity to meet with the U.S. administration at the highest levels. And the purpose of that meeting was to get an understanding of where the U.S. might be and how the U.S. and how Alberta citizens can benefit consequent to Alberta becoming a sovereign country. So in that first meeting, before we even sat down at the conference table, a statement was made from the U.S. administration that we want you to know that the U.S. administration strongly supports Alberta becoming a sovereign country. All right? And we talked about the relevance of not joining the U.S. as the 51st state. And I want to touch on this because this is important. For one thing, the majority of Albertans wouldn't be there anyhow. But there are barriers that make joining the United States as the 51st state a virtual impossibility. For one thing, Alberta would first have to become a sovereign country, okay? Because the U.S. can't take in a group of people and call them a state. So Alberta would already have to be a sovereign country. So that comes as a consequence of a referendum. Second is that the populace of Alberta would have to vote in a second referendum on joining the U.S. Third, there would have to be a majority vote in the U.S. Congress, that is in both the Senate and in the House of Representatives, and there have to be a 2/3 majority vote in both in both areas for Alberta to join. But the U.S. Congress will never agree, and here's why. Because, as you can see, the Republicans and the Democrats don't seem to get along very well, do they? All right, so the quid pro quo for Alberta to join the U.S. to get congressional support would mean that the Republicans would have to agree that Washington, D.C. become a state and Puerto Rico become a state, and they're both democratically inclined. So what do you think is going to happen? It's unlikely. So we don't need to, I want to make that clear for anybody that thinks it's possible to do that. It may be decades or a century down the line, but it certainly isn't going to happen in the immediate term. Now, part of the reason why we were able to meet with the U.S. administration has to do with, you remember what Mr. Trump said following his election and the Republican election win. He said, we want North American-wide security and we want energy security, and we can provide that. Not only that, through trade relations, we have a lot more to offer in terms of clean water, agriculture, forestry, minerals, etc., coking coal, etc. So we have a lot to offer, but we have a lot to gain as a result. The other thing that we talked about in that first meeting was, would the U.S. acknowledge Alberta's sovereignty subsequent to a successful referendum? And the answer to that is yes, they would. And this is important for another reason. And then the second meeting that we had on September the 29th basically reinforced exactly what we had at the first meeting. But the second meeting was a 2-hour meeting, and we discussed a lot of issues, and we were asked not to share certain aspects of the conversation, and so we respect that. And we respect the fact that they didn't want us to share which department we met with either. But let me just say this. One of the individuals from the U.S. administration is the chief of staff at of one of the most powerful secretaries in the Trump cabinet. So you can probably guess who that might be, but I can't say who that will be. And he was going to a meeting at the White House right after our meeting. So fundamentally, they're very supportive of Alberta sovereignty. They will help facilitate Alberta becoming a sovereign country subsequent to a successful referendum on sovereignty. They don't want to interfere with the referendum at all, and we don't expect that they would do that either. Now let me tell you about the meeting, this was fascinating, that we had with Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon. He's the leader of the Parti Québécois in Quebec. They're leading in the polls. They've won the last 3 by-elections. They're a party that wants Quebec to become a sovereign country unto itself. And so Mitch and Jeff and I met for 4.5 hours at the Palliser, and this was at their request. And I think it's interesting that a political party from Quebec, wanted to meet with the Alberta Prosperity Project. But they recognize that this movement has grown so large, they wanted to know more about it and what Mr. Plamondon could do to perhaps emulate some of the things that we're doing. But some of the things that were fascinating in that meeting were as follows. Why does Quebec want to leave? Well, they want to leave Canada because they want their language preserved, their culture preserved, and they want to get out from under federal corruption, federal political economic corruption. That's what Mr. Plamondon said. And that's interesting to think about because we also talked about equalization, because they're getting about 13.6, call it $14 billion a year in equalization, and that's what we are contributing to the equalization formula through our taxation. And he said, we don't need equalization payments, and yet they're the major recipient of equalization payments. He said, we don't need it. And he said, it is only being used, those equalization payments, for political corruption purposes, to bribe people to do certain things. That's what he said to us. And so he said, we don't need it. And he said, we produced a document like you guys did. Like, for those of you who don't know, we have on our website, it's called the Value of Freedom document, which looks at, it's an analysis of what our fiscal capacity circumstances would be subsequent to Alberta becoming a sovereign country. And the fiscal capacity surplus is massive. Just to put it in sharp perspective, we give $70 to $75 billion a year to Ottawa, like I said earlier. How much do you think we get back in federal transfers? About $30 billion. So we're leaving about $45 billion on the table. Can you imagine what we could do with $45 billion? You can imagine. Can you imagine what we could do with getting the $400 billion back from the pension fund that belongs to Alberta? You get the drift here. Okay, so they did an analysis just like we did, and he said, we don't need the equalization payments because out from under federal regulation and taxation, Quebec's fiscal capacity surplus will more than compensate for the loss of the $14 billion in equalization payments. Good point, right? So one of the interesting things that Mr. Plamondon said as well is he said, well, we know that you're going to meet with the U.S. administration. Would you ask them if, when we have a referendum on sovereignty, that they'll acknowledge Quebec's sovereignty as well? And so we did, but we didn't get an answer. We just posed the question. We did what we said we would do from that meeting at the Palliser in Calgary. Now, a couple of other things that I thought were quite interesting. We discussed the idea that if Quebec was a sovereign country and Alberta was a sovereign country, we could respect each other's differences, but probably work together in areas where we have a meeting of the minds, all right? And we'd be out from under federal corruption. You see, the way the federal government is operating, if you think about this, each province is different. Geographically, it has different natural resources, and the people are slightly different in terms of their values and cultures and that sort of thing. Certainly from a political point of view, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Central and Northern BC vote the same way in every federal election, right? So the point that I'm getting at here is we can appreciate our differences without being subject to what the federal government is doing to us. It's like taking all of us, putting us into a blender, and at the end, we're supposed to be homogenized and think exactly the same and support the federal government, et cetera, et cetera. But we're all different, and we need to celebrate our differences, not try and make everybody the same as everybody else, because that's what makes us unique as human beings. Anyhow, the point is, in that little diatribe, was the point that we would probably get along better with Quebec, recognizing that we are different and work together where we have common interests. But one of the most fascinating components of this discussion had to do with what the Quebec legislature did. So remember when King Charles was here for the opening of Parliament? Did you know that the entire Quebec legislature unanimously voted to end the relationship with the monarchy? Did you know that? You know, our Constitution is a constitutional monarchy. That's what it's called. It's called parliamentary democracy, or the other term is a constitutional monarchy, where the highest authority is the monarchy, right? So they voted to end the relationship with the monarchy. What are the implications of that? We asked Mr. Plamondon. He wasn't sure. But he said, when I become premier next year, I'm going to jettison the lieutenant governor as well. Well, so think about this. So they've jettisoned the monarchy. They've jettisoned the lieutenant governor. They never signed the Constitution Act 1982. Are they already a sovereign country? I don't know. But you know, it's interesting because the process to get to sovereignty ostensibly requires a referendum. And as you know, we're following a process that requires a referendum that, when successful, triggers what is called the Clarity Act, which is the legal pathway for a province to leave Canada. And it requires a clear question for the public to vote on, yes, no answer, a clear outcome, which should be 50% plus one in a democracy, and demonstration that you have consulted other interested parties, such as other political parties and other interested parties like First Nations, as an example. But what's interesting about this in relation to Mr. Plamondon is that the Supreme Court analysis of what's called the Quebec secession reference. So when Quebec had its 1995 referendum that missed by a fraction of a percentage point, the federal government wondered whether or not a province had the right to unilaterally declare its independence. And they referred that question to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said this in section 154 and 155. It said, if a province does not have the unilateral right to declare independence, however, if a people find themselves in a colonial relationship, subjugated, dominated, exploited, and their self-determination inhibited, they have the right to pursue becoming a sovereign country. And section 155 says, although a province doesn't have the right to unilaterally secede from Canada, they could do a de facto declaration of independence if other countries acknowledge that Alberta is a sovereign country as a consequence of a referendum on sovereignty. In Quebec's case, as I said to Mr. Plamondon, it may be possible for you to simply declare your independence unilaterally based on section 155 of the Supreme Court analysis of the Quebec secession reference. So this is all to end off by saying to you this. We're on the cusp of getting to a referendum on sovereignty. And for those of you who are not yet on the independence train, you have some more information. You're going to get some more information from Mitch here in a second, and that should cement it for you. But let me ask a question to finish off. If Alberta was already a sovereign country, would we want to join Canada under the current terms and cost of membership? Thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Dennis Modry. Now, I will shortly introduce our next speaker, but first, a little bit of business to take care of. If you're new to this kind of meeting, I will simply call it the buckets. You might think the rooms are free and the posters are free and everything else is free, but they are not. So the volunteers are going to bring the buckets around. If you happen to have a couple of extra $100 bills in your wallet, please put them in. No one will say no. But thank you for your support directly for this mission.
The Carnegie. Going to make a comment. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who didn't think I had a career in cardiac surgery, 1984 and 1999, I did 2 open heart surgeries on this guy. His name is Jim.
Yeah, he's a good doctor.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, and I think we're back. Our next speaker is Mr. Mitch Sylvestre. Mitch is the owner and operator of Sylvestre Sporting Goods, a well-established store in Bonnyville, Alberta, since 1989. Mitch is actively involved in political advocacy, chairing the Alberta First Pension Plan Initiative, and is also the Chief Executive Officer of the Alberta Prosperity Project. I think you'll find that Mitch is an advocate for the people, speaking openly, with honesty and integrity. Please welcome Mr. Mitch Sylvestre.
Hello, everyone. How are you tonight? Good. Nice to be in Edmonton. I was here not very long ago, and I'm going to share something with you. A guy stood up and asked me a question. He said, what are you going to do if you lose this referendum? And honest to God, it had never dawned on me. So I said, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. And hopefully we won't have to think about it. But here we go. We're going to talk to you about some things. It's going to be a little different than Dennis's presentation. I'm going to kind of go back in history a little bit. I'm going to talk to you about what the Liberals are doing, what they have been doing, what they continue to do, and really why we're doing this. Because the real reason we're doing this is because, honestly, myself, I was not an independent Alberta outside of Canada guy until April 29th. So I was sitting on the fence thinking, you know what, maybe we could fix this relationship. But it's because I didn't understand it, because I hadn't looked into it deeply, and that's going to be my job tonight. I'm going to try and make those people, and I thank them, those people that are not quite sure exactly why we're doing this and why we're out here every night sharing this message with people. So the whole premise that we're talking about here is, Dennis brought this up, that Clifford Sifton said a long time ago. And the reason they brought settlers into the West was to give them land so that they could farm and they could create wealth for the East. All of these settlers came from France. They came from, actually, Ukraine, because where I'm from, they're French and Ukrainian farmers, and that's who the people were that broke the land, literally broke the land by hand, and actually planted crops, raised cattle, and actually created wealth for the East. However, that hasn't changed. We're still doing the same thing. Only thing is that we had the fortunate accident of finding all that oil and natural gas. So now we're very, very rich, but we contribute all of that to the East. So we have to ask ourselves, who are these people? Who are the people in the East that are taking this from us? And I actually know they're taking it from us, and I'll get into that, and it'll be very clear to you. Who are these people? What gives them the right to actually think that they can take everything that we produce here in the West and use it for themselves and not leave any here for us? And if they had left some here for us, we wouldn't be in debt, right? Because our province is in debt. And as a matter of fact, we produce, 87% of Canada's oil. There's absolutely no way we're top 5 oil producers in the world. There's absolutely no way the province that produces that much oil and gas should be broke. But we are. All right, so we'll get started. All right, so Confederation is working exactly the way they designed it to work. So in order for them to do what they do, this has to be the case. All right, so understand this. Western Canada, with a population of 11.7 million, has 24 senators. Atlantic Canada, population 2.4 million, has 30 senators. Okay? And out of 107 senators, Justin Trudeau, 107, 108, Justin Trudeau appointed 97 or 98 of them. So they're overlooking the House, and they're supposed to be kind of a stopgap if they do things wrong and delay things if they're crooked. But they're all Liberals. So the Liberals are in power. That continues to be the way it is. And in actual fact, Alberta, all by itself, produces more and has more people, twice as many people as all of Atlantic Canada, and we only have 6 senators, right? As compared to their 30, with half of our population. It's the same in the other house. Alberta has 4.4 million people. The Maritimes have 2.46. They have 32 federal seats. We have 37. 55% more representation than we have here. Now understand this. That could be changed in a week. They could make that fair right now. They could pass a law, make it fair, change all the boundaries, and make that work. So they have no intention of doing that because it's a $40 billion deal for them. And they're used to having the revenue. The Supreme Court justices by region, 2 for all of the West, 3 for Quebec, 3 for Ontario, and 1 for the Maritimes. So what's the significance of that? First of all, I'm going to share something with you that I didn't know until just recently. And all of those judges have to be bilingual. So which way do French Canadians tend to vote? They tend to vote Liberal. I'm French Canadian, my family's French Canadian. Not going to say that I voted Liberal, but I know they have. So just saying that that's just a tendency for French Canadian people to actually be Liberal and support Liberal, and that's what we see in the East. Now here's the problem. This is the elephant in the room. Has anybody understood that things are not normal? Things have changed. Everything feels off. We're not understanding quite what's going on. And here Pierre Poilievre sums it up. He says, Nazi socialism, Soviet socialism, narco-socialism, and all other forms of socialism move at a different speed, but always to the same destination. This is the most important thing I'm going to tell you tonight. Impoverished hell for the many, and special powers and wealth for the few. And that is traditionally always the way socialism ends up. Now, we weren't going to be able to talk about this as little as, 6, 7 months ago. We're telling Canadians that we're being shoved into socialism and communism. So whether or not we want to admit it doesn't have any bearing on the fact that it's happening. Only freedom, free speech, free enterprise, and free choice empowers all to fulfill their potential and live good and great lives. And that's why we're here. We want to go back to that. I lived my life probably in the best time in history. I was able to choose basically everything that we did. I started a business at 21 years old. I'm still running the same business today. And you know what? Basically, I've been blessed. I've had a very good life. But that was a life that I had made for myself, that I was able to make for myself. And, I chose that I wanted to live out in the country, hunt, fish, play hockey, raise my kids over there. And that was a decision I made. And it turned out to be a good decision. But what's the first thing they're going to do if they want to make us a socialist state? Take our guns away. And they're 100% doing it. In the US, after they fought the British, they understood that the biggest problem of the people is government. Government kills more people than anything else. Anywhere in the world historically, governments have killed more people than anything else. So they understood back in those days that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So what they're saying is it's very important, if you're going to have a free country, that the people can defend themselves from tyranny and government. And Doug Ford, who was anti-gun, now totally understands that he wants to be able to shoot criminals who break into their house, especially his house. Him and his wife were in bed, and somebody broke into his house. And apparently he didn't leave the keys by the door, so they must have been looking for other things. But he understood something that everybody should understand. If you get violated and you're in the house and there are people running around your house, it's a pretty helpless situation, right? Now imagine if they come through with this amnesty that they're going to end next year and they send people to your house to get your guns. And who do you think these people are going to be? I'm under no illusion of who those people are going to be. I totally understand who those people are going to be. Now understand this. Like APP, we're actively working directly with government to make sure that this doesn't happen. We started this last year. We started this 18 months ago, where we actually went to the government, went to the premier, and said, look, we need to have the right to bear arms in Alberta to protect our people, to protect our citizens, because there are Albertans that will not give their guns up. I know that. So please understand that they're going to come to your house, they're going to break your door down in the middle of the night, they're going to haul you out of bed in whatever state of undress you're in, and they're going to demand that you show them and give them your guns. If you don't register your guns or give your guns to them. And that's exactly what will happen. So we're working very hard to change that. Right now, we have no protection from that. And if you want to know, that was the main reason why I called that rally in Edmonton 2 weeks ago. At that time, the amnesty was 2.5 weeks from running out, and the federal government had not said that they were going to extend it, which they have, but they said the next extension is the last extension. So at that time, there was going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 150,000 Albertans that have restricted firearms that they know about that weren't going to turn them in, I believe. So on the next day, they were going to lose their passport. They were going to become a criminal, so therefore they're going to lose their passport. And the next thing that was going to happen is that their PAL was going to be stopped because they're a criminal. And you can't have a PAL if you're a criminal. And then, if you left Alberta, they would be able to arrest you and throw you in jail up to 5 to 7 years. And if they would have to, the RCMP would be compelled to go to your house and get all of your guns, including your restricted ones. So the Premier's plan up to that point was to get the RCMP not to enforce that. But if you're a criminal and you don't have a PAL, then they have no choice but to enforce it. So we explained to the government that that was not a very good path, that we have to do something else. So they're exploring something else right now, and they promised us that we're going to have something by the spring to protect gun owners in Alberta. All right, so let's talk about the system. So we give $13.5 billion a year to Quebec in transfer payments. How does Quebec qualify for transfer payments? They don't put their largest asset in the balance sheet. Their biggest asset is Hydro-Quebec. Hydro-Quebec, because it's a green industry, gets a hall pass. As a consequence to that, they become a have-not province, and we have to send them $13.5 billion a year every year. And notice how much we get. It's a constant. We never get any. They get a $13.5 billion check every year to do something. We don't just understand what that is. That would be like giving us enough money to build 13 hospitals a year in Alberta. That's how much that $13 billion would be. And it's annual, it's every year. All right, Alberta's net contribution to Ottawa. Now I'm just going to show you how we overcontribute and how unfair this system is to Alberta. So from 2007 to 2022, we've overcontributed $244 billion. Now look to see where everybody else is. Ontario, the largest economy in Canada, is 1/6 of that, right? And that's over 10, 15 years there. And look at Quebec at the other end. They receive $327 billion. We give $244, they receive $327. So there's a $560 billion discrepancy there. And Canada Pension, again, same thing. That red number is the overcontribution from Alberta. Look at everybody else. 12.1 is what Nova Scotia received. Everybody else is right about par. Now let me explain to you about pension. They will pay you your pension in a free and independent Alberta because they're legally obligated to do it. Understand this, you will not lose your Canadian citizenship in a free and independent Alberta. You're allowed to have more than one passport. You can be a citizen, like Carney has 2 or 3 citizenships, American, Canadian, British. So understand this. We pay, and I'll explain to you how this works. We pay $9 billion a year to the federal government in CPP. Our seniors receive 6. Every year, that $3 billion overage, or whatever we over-contribute, goes into a fund for Alberta seniors. The CPP Act was written that way originally, so that if you over-contributed, and this is Ontario's idea, that you would be able to get your over-contribution plus your interest. Okay? So Alberta, according to the LifeWorks report, has over-contributed up till now $400 billion. So I'm going to ask you, Canada Pension says it's earning 9.5, 9.8%. So if it's earning 9.8%, the interest on that $400 billion is, I'll round it up high, is $40 billion a year. So our pension fund could really, without anything, we could contribute $40 billion interest, $9 billion contribution from our workers to cover a $6 billion a year debt. It's a pretty good deal, right? We could actually give our seniors an 8-fold increase in pension and still have the principal of $400 billion. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Why has the Premier not called that back? I know why. I've asked her to call it back. I have actually spent 100 of these kind of town halls educating people on the benefits of an Alberta pension. They didn't call it back because Poilievre, before the federal election, asked them not to, so that it wouldn't hurt their chances to win. But however, we all know he didn't win. Right? So what's the consequence of it? The consequence of it is this. Now moving forward, we're going to have to negotiate that number with the federal government, because I don't think we have time to get it back. So unfortunately, that set us back. It set Alberta back. All right, so when the Premier said, when I became Premier, I would fix everything in 6 or 7 months, but everything's broken. So what does that mean at her level? At her level, that means everything's too corrupt to fix. And there's really not any other way to say it. The problem with our bureaucracy is it's so entrenched, and it's so big, and it's so strong, that it's very hard to make meaningful change, and you can't make any meaningful change you can't do it quickly. So let's look back at the last 10 years of Liberal government. So I'm going to share something with you. I am not of the school of thought that believes that Mr. Justin Trudeau was a buffoon. I'm going to share with you and show you very clearly what Mr. Trudeau did to Canada and to Alberta. We'll start right here. All right, let's understand what we have here. We're the richest piece of real estate in the world. We have infrastructure, we have minerals, we have natural gas, we have oil, top 5 in the world, agriculture, farming of all kinds, different kinds. We have clean water, and we have people that understand how to produce. We have productive people, we have intelligent people, we have people that work hard. That's one of the most important things that we actually do have. Because we can take the oil out of the ground, we can farm the land, we can do all the rest of it. Those people that are gatekeeping us can't do any of that. These are the people that are taking our money. They can't get a drop of oil out of the ground, and I know they can't run a farm. So what I'm saying to you is we can't be naive enough to believe that the rest of the world doesn't want what we have. Right? And that's our problem right now. The rest of the world is actually coming to try and take what we have. We've never had a war here. We don't understand all that, the way that happens and those things, but we cannot be naive enough to believe that nobody wants what we already have. And they're actually coming for it, and they're going to try to leave it in the ground so they can get it at some later time. So, I'm going to have to stay away from there. That's causing me to ring. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. So what I'm telling you is the Liberal government and the East, they're looting our treasury. They're actively looting our treasury. These people, is there anybody in the room, and I'll forgive you, that thinks that government is not stealing from us? Is there anybody in the room that believes government is stealing from us? So that's a large majority of people here. So let's start there. The audit of $187 billion worth of Liberal infrastructure spending finds that 20,000 missing projects. Okay, 20,000 missing projects. That's not two. That's not 200. That's 20,000 missing projects. So I'm going to ask you a question. Nobody's gone to jail over that. And what happened to the money? We don't know. Right? And that's just a part of the beginning of it. This lady, her name is NG, actually got, how much money did they say? $130 million in a small business deal, and she fabricated the results. She lied about the results. The $130 million is missing, right? Nothing happened with the $130 million. They actually manufactured success stories on this. And let's talk about ArriveCan. They sealed it for 75 years. They sealed it for 75 years so that we couldn't find out where that money went. And Gilbo siphoned $250 million into his own personal business. $400 million, the federal government, when they prorogued Parliament just before Trudeau left office. They had $400 million missing from the slush fund. Mr. Carney was asked about it. You know what he said? Oh, that was before. We're not going to worry about that. That was before. $240 million for a vaccine factory that never built a vaccine. Okay, so what we're talking about here is we'd identified $1 billion of missing money. No one went to jail. I want to ask you a question. Did we elect kings? So how come they're not accountable? And I'm going to share something with you. That is why this cannot be fixed. How can you deal with criminals? These are organized criminals. Right? I mean, how do you define that any other way? I mean, they're organized crime. How many organized crime families are there in Canada? 4,000. 28 of them in government. That's right from the RCMP. That's right from the RCMP. And if you go online, they actually changed it. You can still get the 4,000 organized criminal families in Canada, but they took out the 28 in government out of it. And I want you to believe that when they said there was 28 in government, I heard it. I played it again, and I heard it. And believe me, it was there, but it's no longer there. So that's our problem in a free and independent Alberta. How can we negotiate with these people? And I want to ask you something else. How many pipelines can they build? If they're stealing all the money from us, what difference is it going to make? Really? Right? What would be the good of building more pipelines? It would put our people to work. That would be the good. But there'd be no end result. We wouldn't be any better off. Mr. Trudeau is a magician. I'm going to tell you why. He started out with about a $4 or $5 million balance in his bank account as Prime Minister. He earned $408,000 a year for 10 years, and now he's got $92 million in the bank. How does that work? Well, yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things. But here's the thing. If he's showing that, how much do you think he has? And I'm going to share this with you. $11 billion in overseas gender programs. All right, now let's just figure this out. Let's try and be reasonable about this because I can't understand that, first of all. The second thing I want to understand, and I want you to understand, is if you were the leader of a country that they were going to offer you $1 billion for a gender program, first of all, what would you do with it? But second of all, what I would like to know is if they offered you $1 billion and they said to you, you know what, we'll give you $1 billion if you give me $600 million back. Do you think that would be a possibility? And now understand how nice this is, because that money's already out of the country, right? So it can be put anywhere. and there's no tracing it. All of this foreign aid is suspect. All of this foreign aid, Afghanistan, just FYI, not having anything to do with Canada, was the largest money laundering scheme in the history of the world. So why do you think that they dumped all those helicopters and stuff into the ocean when they left Afghanistan? So they didn't have to count them. So they didn't know how much was missing. Remember, it was such a big deal, oh, we left all this stuff over there? Well, they left it over there on purpose. Like the American army could pull that stuff out of there. Come on, biggest army in the world. They didn't have to leave there in a hurry. They just had to get out of there and make sure that there was no way to track the inventory. Now, Justin Trudeau, when he became Prime Minister, said this to the New York Times. He said, there is no core identity, no mainstream in Canada, and consequently that makes us the first post-national state, which means a post-national state is after the nation, post-national, with no borders. Are we seeing that play out? This is 2015. How many people do we have coming in like we have no borders? Right? This is happening. Okay, so here we go. This is step one. This is the ring that controls all the rings right here. If you are going to be a tyrant and you are going to take over an area, a country, a province, whatever, this is the first most important crucial step. In 1954, there was a statute in the Criminal Code of Canada that said it was illegal for media to lie to the public. I remember that clearly. I remember when they had to have verification, double verification, or they would go to jail. In 2019, Mr. Trudeau passed Bill C-19, which made it legal for the press to lie to you. And they've been lying to you ever since. Notice how close to 2020 that is, when COVID came out. Do you believe that's an accident? No, me neither. I know it's not an accident. But if you control the media, so understand all those people out there that you're having a hard time talking to because they're thinking, oh my God, the CBC is telling me the truth, is because that's what they're used to. Right? It's only been 6 years since that's been changed. So they're used to the media telling them the truth, so understand this is not their fault. They didn't expect the Canadian government to pass a bill. Now understand that. Why would you do that if you were legitimate? Why would you pass a bill that would allow you to lie to the people? Hitler gave everybody in Germany a radio in the mid-30s, and everybody thought that was really nice. But he was giving them the only means of news collecting that they have, so he could feed them information. And he controlled the media. And what's happening here? I remember clearly when Trudeau said, I'm going to give $700 million to the media. Do you guys all remember that? I went nuts. I said, how is that possible? This is way back then when it happened. I said, he's going to control the media. Does anybody in the room ever believe that we're going to ever have another conservative government? How could we have a conservative government with this stuff going on? We lost a 20-point lead in 3 weeks. Right? How the heck is that is why we have to go. Because we're going to be ruled by these people forever, the way this is going. And what's the rest of it? Censorship bill after censorship bill after censorship bill, one after the other. When I was growing up, the very mention of censorship was taboo. Nobody ever thought that our government would dare censor our people. Nobody ever thought that the government would dare lie to our people and stay in government. Like they could lie once, but they couldn't stay in government. But look what's happening. This is the norm. This is what has become the new Canada. This is step two. This is step two now. So the first step is to control the information. This is step two. The very concept of a nation founded by European settlers is offensive to me. He's offended by the people in Alberta that actually settled this area and made it rich. That offends him. Old stock white Canadians are an unpleasant relic, that's us, and quite frankly, replaceable. And we will replace them. So what do? 15 million immigrants into Canada since 2015. And this year alone, 1.94 million. So they're not slowing down. So they are actually replacing us. Do you also know that from ages 0 to 35, there is not a province west of Quebec that Canadians are in the majority? From 0 to 35. So what does that do? That fills up our hospitals, it fills up our schools, that does all manner of stuff to destabilize us. That's step 2, destabilizing the economy. Now, the funny thing about all this, and it's nothing funny at all, is that the school teachers are striking for 4% pay raise every year. We're offering you 35% right off the bat on day one. So let's just scale that back. Let's just say that 35% is more than what we're able to deliver. Let's just say it's 20%. 20% is slam dunk. You will be 20% richer on day one in independent Alberta without a question. So it would take the teachers 5 years to get that 20%, right? And here's the funny thing. Their unions gave $1.1 million to the NDP, which is a uni-party across Canada, which propped up the Liberal government that's bringing all these immigrants into Alberta and actually creating the very problems that they're striking about. Right? What 30% or 25 or 30% of kids in urban schools don't speak English very well. How hard would that be for an educator? Like, just imagine, it's impossible. All right. We pay 42.3% in tax. We don't understand where it comes from, so I'll explain it to you. We pay more taxes than any nation in the world. We pay 33 taxes. What's the purpose of all this? The purpose of all this is to make you poorer. They want to make you poorer because rich people are not easy to manipulate and control. Rich people have FU money. They can move. They can do whatever they need to do. Rich people have options. But I read something cute the other day. It said that gold is the currency of kings, silver the currency of artisans, and debt is the currency of slavery. And where are we? Most people, most Canadians, most Albertans are neck deep in debt. So here's the taxes that we pay. Carbon tax, personal income tax, corporate income tax, GST, excise taxes on fuel, alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, customs duties, air traveler security tax, luxury tax, provincial tax, capital gains tax, land transfer tax, media tax, regulation tax, CPP tax, business tax, and estate tax, which is not there. So I was in Le Crete not very long ago, and I had dinner with a gentleman whose dad had just passed away, and he had 5.5 quarters of land at $1 million a quarter. The estate tax on that, the capital gains that he would have to pay on that, came to $2.5 million. So they had to sell the land. They couldn't keep the land that their dad had earned, that they had worked for their whole lives, that they couldn't transfer that down to the kids. Do you think that's an accident? It's absolutely not an accident. Do you think it's fair that you work your whole life and pay for things with after-tax money, and then they tax the difference between what you paid for it originally and what it's worth today, and then that you get to pay 50% tax on that? And that's exactly what's going on. And the problem is that we're accepting that. I know we don't like it. I certainly don't like it. I'm at the stage where I should be done in business, but my kids want to work in my business. And I'm telling you what, I can't afford to give it to them. Because if I pass away, they're going to have a tax bill that won't allow them to run the business. It's too big. So that's where we're at. So you actually have to sell it, make them shareholders, give them shares, but that still doesn't work very well. So let's talk about COVID. Okay, so now we've got the third thing. They're taxing the hell out of you. Every time they pass a tax, they're taxing the hell out of you. So you earn 100 grand, you get to spend 57. In a free and independent Alberta, let's just be conservative and say you get to spend 80. Is that worth it, making a change? And then just imagine what's going on with your kids, because I have kids I have 5 kids. And my youngest one of the twins, is a lawyer. And she graduated from law school, and she's working downtown Calgary, and she was earning, a couple of years ago, $100,000 a year. She couldn't even afford to live on her own. She was making student loan payments. She had to have a roommate because the math didn't work. Imagine. Think about that. I can remember, guaranteed, I started my business as a 21-year-old, first of all, and then when I was in high school, I had friends. Back in those days, there was no birth control, so 2 or 3 girls got pregnant every year. Yeah, they were still doing it. This is taking a chance. But, you know, some of those people are still married. As a matter of fact, most of them are still married. But the point of the conversation is this. They could buy a house. They could buy a house and the mom could stay home and they could earn enough money so that they could make it work. So the other thing that this is all doing is it's making our children not able to have larger families. They know that. That's why they're bringing all these people in. Right? That's totally part of the plan. So let's talk about COVID. We're not going to talk about the fact that there's people out there that think that this COVID vaccine hurt a lot of people. That is something you're going to have to. I tried to get an investigation done. I brought it to all the CA boards, tried to get it done. I was blocked at every turn, and it ended when they told me that it doesn't matter, even if we investigate it, we will not get a judge that will. We cannot find a non-corrupt judge to do it. Now, just imagine, did anybody think that that was the case here? I heard that again today. I did a podcast today and we were talking about that. I said, you know what? They said, what's the solution? I said, the only solution is we're going to have to put those criminals up there in jail, and maybe if we could actually hold them accountable for what they do, there's hope for Alberta to stay in Canada. But you know what I was told? There is not a judge that would put those guys in jail, no matter what they do. How sad is that? And here's the problem with that. The problem with that is it's not going to get fixed now, next week, next year, right? The only way we fix this is to change it completely. We have to get out of there. That is the only way to change it. If that's really the case, and I really believe it's the case, and I'm sure most of you believe it's the case, that we have to change things in a radical way. Or our kids haven't got a prayer. So here, let's talk about what happened during COVID. First of all, they admit it was about political control and power. And here's what happened. They doubled the money supply. So what happens when you double the money supply is it halves in value. There's a direct correlation. So I'm in business. I've told you guys multiple times. I sell guns. I sell all kinds of sporting goods, but I sell guns, and I use this as an example. A box of 30-06 Remington ammo 4 years ago was $29.99. Today it's $64.99. Same box. It hasn't changed for 40 years. It's exactly the same bullet, but it's more than double in price. So clear example that your money is worth it. Been to the grocery store lately? All right, $95 for a steak. Jeff was talking about that today. They went to somewhere and they paid $95 for a steak. Like, oh my God, 3 years ago you could buy a cow for $1,200. Like the whole damn cow, right? And it cost you $500, $600 to butcher it. I know. I have a friend that I buy a cow from every year. And yeah, you know what it costs today for that cow? $5,500. Same cow. Those guys are making good money, good for them. But what I'm saying to you is it's not affordable to do that anymore for most people. Now, the other key thing that you want to understand about this is that they did no audit. So they printed $328 billion. This is during COVID now. 39, 328, 90, and 35, while Mr. Trudeau was in business. Doubled, spent more money than all previous Canadian prime ministers combined, right? And now we owe it. So let's talk about how that works. So I want you to explain to me, because I don't understand, and I really don't understand, I'm not kidding, is how you create money out of thin air, put a number on a check, and send it to people, and you owe it to someone. And I want to understand how we owe interest on that. $1 billion a week is what we're paying interest on that. Who the hell is getting the interest? I don't know. I don't understand how it works. Doesn't that concern you? That you print this money, boom, put a number on a check, you send the check out, and you owe it to somebody. There's been no wealth exchanged. You didn't back it on gold. You didn't back it on anything, but you owe it. All right. Here's the other thing. Now, whichever side of climate change you're on, it doesn't matter. The reason, when they take it seriously, we'll take it seriously. How about we go do that? Right? So they're shutting our industry down based on this. The carbon taxes cost billions, Canadians billions over 5 years, hurting the economy while reducing CO2 emissions by 11.9 gigatons. China produces 11.9 gigatons of CO2 every day and a half. Right? And it doesn't stay over China. It blows in the wind. So if they were serious about climate change, they would stop that. They would quit selling coal to China because the coal comes from Alberta. Vancouver ships more coal than any port in North America. And it all comes from here. Train loads a day back and forth to Vancouver from here. China has 1,161 coal power stations, USA 204. Canada has 8. Did you know that Alberta had 1? And do you know what happened to it? They shut it down. Did you notice what your transmission and distribution charges on your power bill? They're half of your bill. Do you know what that's for? That's to pay the $4 billion that we owe for shutting our coal plant down. That's what that is. It's half your power bill. I'm going to tell you something else. Out of all those countries that are producing all that coal, we're the only one that have a carbon tax. Everything is designed to make you poorer. They have the money supply, they're attacking our industry, they're bringing people in, taking our jobs. There was a lady came up to me at an event just before last week with tears in her eyes. She was in her, I would say, late 30s, early 40s. And she said to me, Mitch, I'm ashamed. I can't afford to go to the AGM. My daughter lives with me, and she's trying to get a job, and she can't get a job anywhere. She's not skilled. She would work at Tim Hortons, anywhere else, but they won't hire you if you're Caucasian because they get a kickback from government for every employee that they hire that's an immigrant. So here she is, not able to work. Mom is working, supporting both of them, and she can't afford to go to the AGM, so we paid her way. But that's not the point. The point of it is that that's pretty sad, right? When we get to that, we've got 14% unemployment on with our kids, and yet we're bringing in 1.95 million temporary foreign workers in the last 8 months. We haven't got jobs for our own people. And they're capping oil and gas. So what are they doing? They're stopping the growth of our industry. That's one of Danielle's demands. Take that away. We're the only country in the world that's, let's go here first. All right. That slide before this one, he was asking Canadians why they're paying $14 a unit for the same natural gas that we're selling the Americans for $4 a unit. They're asking why we don't sell it directly to them. And I don't have an answer, do you? Because we would have to, could you imagine how much better off we'd be? Let's take a step backwards and remember what happened when Germany, Greece, and Japan, all very strong economies, came to Alberta and begged for our natural gas. And Mr. Trudeau, being in charge, said, hey, it's not in our business plan, right? All right, so let's unpack that. He's telling us that it's not in our business plan to create wealth for our people because we want to keep our people poor. It's exactly what he said. Trump just signed that agreement. It's $750 billion. $750 billion in industry we turned away because it wasn't in our business plan. Do you think there's a problem? And who's that going to affect? That's long-term income for our kids, for ourselves, for everybody. And they turned it down. It's not in our business plan. I laugh about it, and I say it's like a customer coming to my store and saying, Mitch, I'd like to spend $4 million a year in your store. I'd say, no, it's not my business plan. Like, right? How dumb is that? Like, it's beyond comprehension. It's almost like, I just look at the stuff that they're doing, and it's like they're taunting us. It's like they're trying to make us angry. And, right? And I'm sitting here trying to tell everybody that this is really going on, and it's actually killing us. But I don't understand it. I really don't. Now listen to this. So Norway came here to study our oil patch 25, 30 years ago. This slide is not correct. They have 1.95 trillion US dollars in an oil fund, which is the equivalent to 2.8 trillion Canadian. Because I buy a lot of US currency, I buy lots of stuff in the US. So it's about 1.4 exchange rate. 1.37, 1.35 to 1.4 is where the exchange rate generally is. So just let's do the math on that. So imagine that we would get 10% interest on that. We wouldn't have to pay any tax at all. None. Every year we would have a surplus and we wouldn't have to pay tax. We're $100 billion in the hole. And they have a $1.95 trillion oil fund. And they came here 30 years ago to study our oil patch. And the kicker is this. We produce 2.5 times more oil than them. Norway produces 2 million barrels a day. We produce 4.7 million barrels a day in Alberta. Where's the money? Right? I'm going to ask you a question. Would we be okay by ourselves? So just Hardisty ships $90 billion worth of oil south to the U.S. Okay, now understand this. 90% of our trade goes south. Okay? So we ship them like $90 billion of oil. 40 billion of that is revenue for Alberta and Canada. We split it between us and the federal government. On day one, if we stopped sending them that 20 billion, that would cover about what? That 40 billion would be about 55 to 60% of our provincial budget. Just that without collecting a penny's tax from anybody else or anywhere else. That 40 billion would be more than, well, it costs 70 billion to run the province of Alberta. There's $40 billion right there. So just understand that. So where's the money is the most important question here. And if you don't believe we're a colony, that should make it very clear. Right? That should make it absolutely clear. Not only does it not stay here, we're in debt. And they're shutting it down. They're squashing it. They're trying to make us poorer. And it's very clear. And this is how they do it the other way. The tanker ban on the West Coast. That's to landlock us. We hear it every night. Oh, we're landlocked. Well, yes, we're landlocked because the federal government wants to landlock us. They won't allow a tanker to pick up oil in Vancouver on the entire west coast of BC to go to the people that actually want our oil and would pay for it dearly and not take the 20% discount that we give the Americans. They would pay full price for it. But they don't allow a tanker to ship oil off the west coast. But the Americans send tankers right down that same west coast from Alaska to Seattle, and they take their oil down that west coast. And we've offered to make the hulls twice as thick, so there would be no problem if you hit a rock. And I go fishing there every year, and I know there's lots of rocks there. I'll guarantee you. But the whole thing is this. It doesn't matter what we do. They're not going to allow it to happen. And we won the pipelines bill, and they don't want us to build pipelines, so that also stops the oil from flowing west. Does anybody remember the Tides Foundation? Okay? Where the Americans tried to shut our oil into the ground. Who funded that? The Rockefellers? Americans. So what do you think is going on? I'm just asking you a question. Do you think they're trying to put our oil in the ground right here and keep it here because it's a safe supply for them? And I'm not saying the Americans are doing it. I mean, the Rockefellers can do it independently of the American government because they're in the oil business. Right? They actually, and who was in the Tides Foundation? Justin Trudeau's best friend. He was running the Tides Foundation. And they actually canned him with a SNC Lavalin thing, and he took the blame for it, and he moved on. Joe Butts is the guy's name. Best friend with Justin, involved with the Tides Foundation. So are they planning this? None of this is an accident. Taiwan says, ship us as much of your oil as you can. We'll take it all. We have an energy emergency. And they call our oil dirty oil, but our oil has stuff in it that the sweet crude from the Arabs doesn't have in it. Our oil, you can make rubber, you can make many things out of our oil that you can't make from that sweet crude. Our oil is actually, in my mind, more valuable than theirs. All rubber, asphalt, all that manner of stuff comes from our dirty oil. Canada's the only country on the planet stupid enough to tax, cap, and ban the very industries that make us rich. All right. And if you think they're only attacking the oil patch and our citizens, well, they're attacking the farmers. Bill C-293 says that in an emergency, the government can come to your farm and seize your land and your herd. What's going on in BC with the ostrich farm? It's playing out right before your eyes. Why would a government make a law like that? To hurt the people. It's plain and simple. Why would you make a law that authorizes them to illegally come to your farm and take your land and kill your herd? Because by 2035, you're going to own nothing and be happy, and that's the path. So they're going to make all these laws, all these censorship laws, in order for them to actually finish that job. It's clear to me. And it hit Canada with retaliatory tariffs on canola oil. Canada tariffed a $10,000 Chinese electrical car to protect the auto industry in the East. The Chinese came back with a 78% tariff on canola, which is bigger than our auto, steel, and aluminum industry combined. So they hurt the West to save the East again. So just understand, that's a common theme. And here we go. They're consciously killing our economy, I'll say it again, and here's the proof. This is investment in industrial machinery and equipment. Look at where Canada is, right down to negative. And look at the Americans. People have no faith in what's going on here because people outside here see what's going on very clearly. Our job is to tell you guys what's going on. That's what we're trying to do here. And foreign investment in Canada, first time ever in the red. People are not investing, they're pulling money out. There's no business plan for them to do it here. And Mr. Carney just said that they're going to keep the oil and gas cap on. All right, so now Dennis alluded to this, but let's look at this. Okay, we grew 1.4% since Trudeau was in government. There is absolutely no way that you can do that unless you consciously try. Ireland is producing more than us. Poland is producing more than us. Lithuania, Turkey, they don't have anything compared to us. Why are they doing that? It's always the same answer. Because they're trying to stifle our economy, trying to make us poorer so that they can finish the job. Now, Mr. Carney in his previous careers has actually been sent from country to country to country so that he can shut down industry, leave the assets in the ground or wherever they are, so the bankers could come back in the background and clean it up at pennies on the dollar. That's what he did. He was a bankruptcy person. That's exactly what he did. Now, Mr. Trudeau handed the keys to Mr. Carney, and Canada was literally burning, right? You understand that now. Mr. Trudeau, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, has put Canada in a very bad spot. And now Mr. Carney's here. Was he appointed? Do anybody remember the Liberal, the race when he was running for leader of the Liberal, and they disqualified that woman that was going to give him a GOA? They disqualified her, so they basically put him there and appointed him. Like, he didn't have to win anything. And then they started the machine up, and I'm not going to lie to you, they campaigned very well, right? But there was a whole bunch of missing votes. Is anybody aware of that? Rebel News reported that there was a whole bunch of missing votes. Remember how close some of these ridings were? You have to be a magician to win the last 2 elections that the Liberals won. You have to win every seat that you need to win in every area. And I'm not saying any more about that than that. I don't believe in the process. It's hard to cheat the process. I know, I understand, I looked into it. But I'm just saying, there's a chance. All right. Dennis went over this. My point about this is, if Mr. Carney said all that stuff in his book, how come every Canadian didn't know about it? What was the press? The First Amendment in the U.S. is, before the gun one, which they found was very important, is freedom of the press. Freedom of expression is necessary for a free state. Because if you don't know what's going on, you can't make a decision. Danielle's demands, what are we going to do if he gives us 3 of them? Is that going to be enough for us to stay in Canada? I don't think so either. Because all they're going to do is legislate them away in 2 or 3 or 4 years. $89 billion in investments have left Canada so far in the first 7 months under Carney. He's got 103 ethics violations, and they're tied directly to this. Carney has secured 42 contracts since becoming Prime Minister. All have been with Brookfield Management. Now that's illegal. That's against the law. You should go to jail for that. But what I'm saying to you is they have no rules. How does that work? How do we have rules and they have no rules? And that's what we have to change. So, since Carney took office, we had 2,400 businesses go bankrupt, 106,000 jobs lost, 12,500 dead from MAID, $60 billion lost. And 17 countries have rolled out digital ID. Canada's right in the middle. Okay, so here's the deal. I was at a Prairie Rising conference in Regina about 3 weeks ago. And there was a gentleman that spoke there, and he was a soldier. And he said, quote, I have been in every shithole fight in the last 30 years in the worst shitholes in the world. And he was in the fighting. He shows a picture of himself standing on top of a roof in his gear, and he said in his speech, and I tried to get him to the rally, but he was busy. He said in his speech that I'm being shot at here. I just didn't want people to see that I was scared, so I stood up there to take a picture because this was a school. This was a school, a girls' school in an Arab country. They went into the school and killed all the girls. And then they cut them up in little pieces and put them in a hole in a sewer underneath the school. Our soldiers went in there and killed those people that killed those girls. Okay? And he said there, he said, our forefathers, my forefathers, paid for their freedom with currency, and the currency was blood. Right? We're in a position now that we're actually fighting for the very same freedoms that our forefathers died for. So here's what I'm asking you. I'm asking you to pay with time. Because this is the way we're going to win this. It's very simple. You have to show up. I'm going to ask you for 10 days that if I call for a rally for something, and it's going to be important, and you'll have notice, that you show up. I'm not asking you to shoot at anybody. I'm not asking you to run towards a machine gun. I want you to stand in a spot and represent yourself. Because the biggest thing that they're afraid of is for us to all get along and for us to all show up to challenge them. Now, that rally that we had last week was a muscle flexing exercise. The reason I call that rally is so they would see that we exist, because I talked to them and I said, you guys are treating us like we don't exist. So I'm going to show you that we do. And what they said to me was, go ahead. So I did. We had 17,000 people approximately there, and we showed them that we exist. Now, we have 225 to 230,000 people on our list. I will guarantee you that if we call our people and half of that list show up, it will be life-altering for government. So, 10 days a year, no hockey, no excuses. Even if you have to miss work, make a plan and just go stand in a spot and wave a flag. Because I'll tell you one thing about rallies and that kind of stuff, because I've organized many. So I'm going to tell you what. What they do is they make you feel really good. And I'll tell you why. Because first of all, you feel you're doing something, and you're with people that think like you. And they energize you for the next steps. I know that. I've organized many, many, many of them. So what I'm asking everybody, again, is for 10 days of your time. So if I ask you, will you show up? That's a question I'm asking you now. That's good. Thank you very much. Okay, so one last thing. Remember one thing. When we voted Danielle in, I thought she'd do that work for us. It hasn't worked that way. When Pierre Poilievre was going to be prime minister, I thought he would do that work for us, and he lost. So then it put us on the road to do these 75 things. It's a lot more work than it would have been otherwise. So I just wanted to be very clear. Politicians are not going to save you. We have to save ourselves here. And there's no way around it. I'm sorry to break the bad news to you, but that is the only way we're going to win this. So remember, the only person coming to save you is the version of yourself that's tired of your current situation. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, how good is that? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mitch Sylvestre. Which would, of course, bring us to the all-important question and answer session. If I could get Mitch and Dennis back up here. Carlos is going to lead us away with 3 questions that came in a written format to the back. Gentlemen, Max, you might want to reframe your camera. Yeah.
All right, everyone, if any of you have questions, please form a lineup starting over here behind me. Just come on up. Of course, we know it's getting a little late right now, so for people who have to go, if you could move to the back, so that way people who have questions can be heard, that'd be awesome. All right, first question. Is there any chance that Ottawa could renege on the law that says that they have to pay a province any share of transfer repayments? And if so, do we have any recourse? Can we survive without those payments?
Well, remember, the concept of transfer payments, some people confuse what's actually happening. They think the money comes from the federal government. The money comes from us. That $75 billion, 70 to 75 billion that we give to Ottawa through taxation. Some of that, about 30 billion, comes back in federal transfers. Health transfers, education transfers, infrastructure transfers, social transfers. That's what comes back to us. So they're simply giving back our own money. So in a sovereign Alberta, we wouldn't be giving it to them in the first place. But we would use that 30 billion to fund our own health, social, infrastructure, fiscal requirements. But we could do more because we would have so much more fiscal capacity to look after those areas. Yeah, well, in terms of what they owe us is that's a really good question, because if you think about what I said earlier, we've given over $1 trillion to Ottawa. We haven't received a cent in return. So it gets to the point of negotiations. Once we have a successful referendum, when we're negotiating, leaving Canada, they're going to say, well, you owe some of the debt. They're going to say, what about Crown Lands? What about NAV Canada? What about borders, et cetera? And we have the ability to say, well, look, we've already given you $1 trillion. We don't need to give you anything more in order for us to leave. But negotiations are always negotiations. We got that $400 billion on the table from the pension fund as well that we can negotiate with. So you could say there's $1.4 trillion that they have control of. So give us some of that back, and then we'll talk to you about certain other things. This becomes a negotiating process. But at the end of the day, if we left and we didn't get a cent back, we would still be far better off than we are now, just simply because of our fiscal capacity surplus.
And the fact that we'd be a free people, right? I've been in business for 50 years, and I've had some really good times, and I've had some tough times, and I'm going to tell you a secret. We can earn it back. We can earn it back. With what we have here, we can earn it back. The most important part of this is we will be away from them and able to make our own rules and be free and independent people, and it will give us the opportunity to lead a very good life.
Is there any concern about an independence party being created or other party that splits the vote?
Splitting the vote is a fear tactic. I'd like to be out of here before the next election, to tell you the honest to God truth. So you know what? I would like to structure our plan A so that we could be out of Canada before we have to worry about splitting the vote. And here's the only way, understand the leverage that we have as APP. If there was going to be an independent party in Alberta, who would it be? Right? We have 250,000 people on the list, and they all want independence. There's nobody that could start an independence party in Alberta without our blessing or without our consent or without anything. Well, yeah, Dennis says we have over 1 million supporters. I hope it's 1.4. But to tell you the honest to God truth, we would be that threat to the government. Because we are that threat to the government, and we try to tell them every day that we are that threat. So just saying, yeah. So I would suggest that the elephant in the room in that situation is us.
Because of the current mess in BC with the courts handing over private property title to native bands, please address the issue of property rights in Canada now and in independent Alberta.
Okay, I'm going to start on this, Dennis. I'll give it to you. We sat in a meeting with the Premier 3 weeks ago, and we're meeting with Indigenous bands tomorrow night. Okay, so just understand that that's what the Premier said. It says 5 different places in the treaties that they signed that they gave away all of their land rights. She also said we're not opening the treaties. And I'm putting words in her mouth, and she can deny that. So just trust me that that's what was said. But I'm not saying that to put her in a box. I'm just telling you that the situation in BC, though, is this. That land that they're fighting over was actually given to them by the federal government originally as a reserve. That is not regular land. That is land that they're going to get back that was already given to them as a reserve. So that's where that fight comes in, and they're blowing it all up and saying that it's going to affect everybody's property rights. That's not actually the case. That piece of property could have been no different than if the federal government had gone to Cahiwan Reserve, which is right by Bonnyville, and actually built something there that they shouldn't have built, and they would come back and say, look, that's our land, we want it back. And that's really what's happening there. So just understand that that is, that's being blown out of proportion based on the facts that people aren't understanding what really went on there. And I've got that firsthand.
Well, the only comment that I would add to that, I was sitting beside Mitch when we were having this conversation with the Premier on September the 27th. And she actually said that she'll respect the treaty rights, hunting, trapping, and fishing, but they're getting no more land. The reservation lands that they have now is what they will have, period. So that's important. But what also is important is to understand that according to David Lametti, the Minister of Justice in the Trudeau government, he said, Canadians don't have the right to own property. And to a very large extent, he's correct. I don't know what that snap, crackle, and pop is. Yeah, but you were doing it too. Anyhow, the point is that in a sovereign Alberta, when we're out from under property tax, then you have the real opportunity to actually own your property, and that's what can happen here. Okay,
So,
other
really
questions?
Maybe a comment about the property tax. Isn't that up to the municipalities to decide what they need for services and infrastructure? And the municipalities set the tax according to what they need. How do you eliminate that?
Well, you eliminate taxation as a consequence of a new constitution for Alberta. You define how government operates at the municipal level and at the country level, because it becomes a sovereign country. So the way it would work is, remember, like I said, we have a situation as a sovereign country to decide how we want to fund things. What's the process going to be? Is the process going to be a corporate tax that's reduced from 23% to 12 or 15%? Is it going to be a 5% consumption tax? Are we going to retain a 10% personal income tax? In both situations, just considering that, you're still going from a circumstance, plus the royalty revenue that comes in. And remember, business will always relocate and invest in one of the least regulated, least taxed regions in the world. So that fiscal capacity surplus that occurs as a result of getting out from under federal regulation and taxation, and the increase of revenue consequent to royalty revenue, investment as well, looks after funding all infrastructure in the province. It looks after, because like I said, you have to take control of what the federal transfer payments do right now, the money that we give that we then get back, funds social transfers or social services, to an extent, education, infrastructure, and something else I'm forgetting, education as well. So to be clear, this is defined in a new constitution for Alberta. But the municipalities will certainly get the money that they need to provide the infrastructure that is actually required. So we're not worried about that. To an extent, you can look at and see it in our Value of Freedom document as well, which was contributed to by actuaries and accountants and business people and economists, actuaries, and business people, constitutional lawyers, etc. And we're going to be making some revisions to it as well, because it's version 1, which is on the website now. And just like the interim constitution that we're going to be proposing will be on the website to look at, to have the public weigh in on as well. So that's the idea, but not to worry about funding municipalities.
I got 2 questions. So I don't know if everybody's aware. My wife, she sells firearms, and the PAL verification was down. It got hacked. That was about a couple weeks ago.
It was what?
So the PAL verification portal for the RCMP, where you verify PALs,
Okay, yeah.
it was compromised about a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
So when she went to verify PALs at where she works, portal was down.
Yep.
So when we looked into this, we found out that all the digital networks throughout Canada are compromised. That's Alberta, the AHS, the school board, everything. Now, digital ID has been touched. You guys touched about that, but I was wondering if you guys had any plan or any information as what you would propose to try and work with guys like me who are cybersecurity specialists to make sure our security is at the utmost protected. The other question I had was, I keep up with what we're doing here. I support APP 100%. I seen what Quebec did when they voted to not recognize the monarch anymore. So I was just wondering, I know that the court case is coming up, and would you tailor the question, hypothetically, if they said that the question wasn't valid, could you tailor the question similar to what Quebec did in order to disband from the monarch to create a constitutional convention moving forward for us to be independent?
Okay, so when Quebec actually had their referendums, the Clarity Act didn't exist. Okay, so the Clarity Act was made after that. Our question is perfect. The problem isn't with the question. The problem is that they don't want this to go ahead because there's a legitimate chance that we're going to win. And so they don't want that. This is a $50 billion a year cash cow for them. Okay, so understand that. So that's the first thing. That will be my first call, by the way, when they say that they're not going to allow a question. That'll be our first call. That'll be the first rally in the streets of Edmonton with a lot of people, just FYI. So just giving you a heads up. So if they deny a question in 2 weeks, plan to wear some warm clothes. But at any rate, so the rest of that stuff about the data, I'm also a gun salesman. I know all about that. The PAL has been compromised forever. I've got a story for you there. It's not related to your question, but I'll share you this. They originally, when Harper became Prime Minister and stopped the gun registry, I got a phone call from the RCMP telling me that I would have to continue to register every firearm regardless of what the statute said. About 2 hours later, I got a phone call from government telling me that if I registered another firearm, they would charge me. So that's the difference between that government and what's going on now. So just FYI. So as far as cybersecurity is concerned, it would be of paramount importance. But how do you understand?
Seemed like,
Yeah.
I spoke to the Minister of Technology last week. We uncovered a massive compromise in the ATA network and the U of A. So U of A students who are becoming MDs have approached our team, and we have uncovered massive malicious code that can basically, all our network in Alberta could be hijacked like this by Russian hackers. There's 3 groups right now, so we've notified them. So when I look at the APP plan, I look at everybody's plan, I'm just wondering, like, you know, it's great that we are looking forward for a better Alberta, but at the same time, everybody uses a digital platform. Our kids, all of us, regardless of our licenses, it doesn't matter. So that needs to be addressed, and I'm hoping that in the future we do make some change, that guys like me will get the job rather than some foreigner who took our job.
Yeah, I'm all about hiring local. I'm all about shopping local too. But that's going to be a step for us after, if and when we get in government. And we're not going to be in government. I'm sure that we'll have other capable people. We'll be tired by then.
So I just want to make one comment about that question. It's not the question that Mitch has proposed, which is, do you agree that Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? That's a legitimate question. That actually mirrors the wording in the Clarity Act as a legitimate question. The problem is not the question. The problem is the statute, which says that any question in relation to constitutional change must not contravene Section 1 to 35.1 of the Constitution Act 1982. Section 1 is our individual freedoms and rights, and the rest of it has to do with Aboriginal rights. Okay, so there was no intention to abrogate anybody's rights. So this is really sort of an interesting twist that we actually didn't anticipate in posing our question. But the court will have to really twist itself into a pretzel to deny the validity of the question that was proposed. So we'll see what happens. We think we can win it. But the other thing is that's coming up is that we have some reason to believe that the provincial government may be changing the statute, both for the Alberta Referendum Act as well as the Alberta Citizens Initiative Act, which may make the court process moot, but we're not going to have an answer to the legislative change before our case is discussed. I think it's November the 21st, 2nd, and 23rd, and then we'll have a decision from the court in December. But so we don't know about that legislation, how it's going to change in particular, and I know that specifically because I got an answer from the Premier today on that.
And I'm going to play devil's advocate here. So they've promised us things before and never delivered. So just going to ask you a question, coincidence or not. They're not going to give us an answer till after the court date, and they're not going to give us any answer because the AGM is on the 28th of November. No. FYI. Just do the math, figure that out, if it's to their benefit. So they're telling us that they're going to do something, but we're not sure they're going to do it. And they're going to hold this off until after the AGM. But anyways, go ahead. Ask your question.
Hi there.
Hi.
Probably all of us here have our money sitting in banks which are headquartered in Toronto and to a lesser extent Montreal. I was wondering, after independence, how do we protect our money from the government of Canada that they don't freeze it or seize it like they did to those convoy folks?
You're still going to be a citizen. You don't have to protect your money. You'll be a Canadian. So how would I protect my money if you're asking me that?
Well,
I'd buy U.S. dollars.
Of course.
It was a week before the referendum.
Weren't those Freedom Convoy folks, weren't they Canadians as well?
What's that?
Those Freedom Convoy folks, they were Canadians.
Yeah,
and they
but that's what I'm
kinda-
trying to tell you. There's no rules.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to explain to you is, historically, you're responsible for your own money. Just take it from there. Figure that out. So I'm just saying, you can move your money. You can be responsible for your money. Would you trust them? I don't. I personally took all of my paper assets and put my money into hard assets. I've done that for the last year. I have no assets that anybody can grab unless they come and physically take them. I have no money left anywhere that they can grab because I don't trust them. And the currency could crash. The fiat currency is about to crash. Whether it's this year, next year, or 2 years from now, it's about to crash. If it crashes, historically what's happened is, the last time it did it was in the 30s, just before the Great Depression. The stock market will crash. So, and I'm not a financial expert, I'm just telling you what happened in the past, and take that for what it's worth. And Dennis will make a comment on that.
Yeah, let me add to this as well. So, you're a Canadian citizen living in Alberta. You can be a Canadian citizen living in Spain or Costa Rica or anywhere, and you can still access your funds. Doesn't matter where in the world you live. The concern that some people say, and remember, it's all fear-mongering as well, is that, well, conceivably the federal government could freeze your money again. That might be a concern that people have. If you really believe that, move your money to Bow Valley Credit Union. Bow Valley Credit Union never even froze anybody's accounts. They refused to do it. So, and there may be other credit unions that would do the same thing. So that's something to consider. But I don't think the federal government would go there. Remember what I said earlier. The U.S. government will help facilitate Alberta becoming a sovereign country. All right? Just think about the importance of that.
Hi, thanks very much for coming and doing this all over Alberta. I appreciate the efforts that you've been making. I'm not up to speed on the significance of what Mr. Lukaszuk has been doing with the petition about staying in Canada. So could you speak to that so we understand how that relates to what you're doing now?
Sure. All right, so the question that Mitch posed is a question to change the Constitution, okay? The question that Mr. Lukaszuk posed is a question that does not have the ability to change the Constitution. It only has the ability to perhaps compel the provincial government to change their bylaws to prevent a vote on independence, or to implement legislation to achieve the same thing. The provincial government isn't going to do either of those things. So his question, if you think about it, let's say, and his question, Mr. Lukaszyk's question is, do you agree that Alberta should remain in Canada? If the answer to that in a referendum was yes to that, nothing happens. If the answer to that question is no, guess what? Nothing happens, because nothing can happen. It's not a question that complies with the Clarity Act, whereas Mitch's question does, so it can't do anything. It would be a $20 million referendum, which was a waste of time, which is why Justice Feasby, who's handling the court case, has said it's a nothing burger, because it doesn't matter. The question doesn't matter. And so we're not worried about Mr. Lukasyk. He's had his moment in the sun, but it can't go anywhere.
And the Premier ultimately going to choose a question, right? The government is going to choose a question. If they run a referendum of any kind, they're going to choose a question. So they got the signatures. I want to go collect our signatures, by the way. So that would be a very big benefit to us. I definitely want that to happen. I'm absolutely no doubt we'll get to the threshold, and so I want to be able to do that. But the difference between those two questions is, I refer it, I don't know if I've shared this with you tonight or not, but I say it all the time. There's a difference between a mosquito bite and getting bit by a great white shark. Our question is the great white shark. It can actually change the Constitution. It could pull us out of Canada. Theirs can do nothing. It can do nothing. And Mr. Lukasyk did some work for us by collecting all these signatures. He reached a threshold, so the Premier can actually take our question and run with it. And she's choosing all of that. So Mr. Lukasyk has now lost his power. He's collected 465,000 signatures to trigger that referendum, so the referendum can be run on anything the government chooses to run it on. So that's where we're at right now. We're waiting for ours to do it, but it could backfire on him. It could actually become the referendum question if she makes it compliant with the Clarity Act. So that's where that is.
Hi, this is more of a statement than a question for people that may not know this, but I agree with the crash and fiat currency collapsing. Maybe what people don't know is that Canada has no gold reserves. Trudeau sold the last of it in 2016, so the Canadian dollar will be worth zero.
And also notice that big countries in the world, including the US and China and Russia, are buying all the gold they can lay their hands on. So just take that for what it's worth. Yes?
Well, I was very pleased about Quebec being kind of under the radar, but supportive, which is great.
Okay.
What about Saskatchewan?
Sitting right here beside me.
And maybe even Manitoba?
The head of the Saskatchewan Prosperity Project is right here. Right on.
And maybe even Manitoba.
Oh, well, I don't know about Manitoba. We'll reach out to Wab and see if he'll send us somebody, but Saskatchewan's sitting right here.
I just wondered, like, is with the, imagine like you guys are drafting the new Constitution and Bill of Rights.
Yes.
But will it be drafted or written once it's like enacted in a way that, you know, a future rogue government can't take us back?
Well, I hope so.
You know, like,
yes.
you know, similar like you know, the U.S. where like certain things are like,
It's
you know,
forever.
being, like enshrined, you know, like the Second and First Amendment, Fourth Amendment.
Well, you know what? Yes. First of all, yes. And the Constitution is going to be a discussion paper, and we've kind of set a plan today that we're going to get it out in the next 2 or 3 weeks because it's just about ready to go. But it's going to be, you'll be able to see it beforehand. You'll be able to participate in it. But here's the thing with that, what you just said at the end. It's going to be up to the people to protect the Constitution, right? I mean, if they can come in and change anything they want if we allow them to do it. So no matter what, I mean, your stand, your vigilance can never go away because that's how we ended up here. So the Americans wouldn't allow their Constitution to be bastardized because they will stand up and fight for it. And that's where we are. That's where we have to be too. And I mean, as hard as that is to understand, that's the nuts and bolts of it. We're in control of everything. And if they could have this done, it would be done already. So they're afraid of us. That's the best way I can put it. So we're going to have to stand there and make sure that we don't let them do the bad things that they already promising they're going to do. Take them seriously, I am. Go ahead, sir.
And this will be our last question.
Last but not least, welcome Saskatchewan. Good to see you. Yeah, oh well, you're coming, I know. I guess my question is, what can we do, other than the AGM, of course? What can we do to bring Daniel Smith aboard to bend that question or to manner that question in our direction, in our favor for the referendum? What can we do? Who can we call? Who can we email? MLAs. So a list of MLAs is, yeah. Anyways, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. To call your MLA and get them to ensure that a sovereignty question that's compliant with the Clarity Act goes forward in a referendum in the spring of 2026. And that is an important thing to do. Also, just by attending the United Conservative Party annual general meeting, which is at the end of this month, 28th, 29th, and 30th, you can vote with respect to the UCP Board of Directors, of which there's some 18, 16 of the 18 are already on board with Alberta sovereignty, but half of them are replaced or are up for renewal or replacement every year. So by attending the UCP AGM, you have an opportunity to ensure that the people that are on that board are also in support of Alberta sovereignty, because that UCP Board of Directors, ladies and gentlemen, is between us as the grassroots and the MLAs, the elected officials. And they will represent us, that UCP Board of Directors, to the MLAs when the MLAs are out of line in certain ways. And so this relates to recall and all sorts of things that the UCP Board of Directors, very important to be there. Plus you can vote on resolutions, policy and governance resolutions, if you're at the AGM as well. And so encourage you to attend.
So I'm a UCP-CA chair. I'm in the UCP party, and I want you to understand something. This week, they approached me to do a debate at the AGM, and they were going to arrange it to be 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon, an open debate on independence. So they asked me if I would do it. I agreed to it because I'm a member. Also, they said to me that I would be debating Benoit Trudeau and either Justin Harper or Rona Ambrose, which I'm fine with. So everybody would get 20 minutes and then we'd get an hour to talk at the end. The government fought it tooth and nail. They did not want to give us any time at the AGM. They did not want independence to be discussed at the AGM in any way, shape, or form, in spite of the fact that 70 or 75% of our people are in favor of independence, and that's UCP party. So then it went to a vote at the provincial board. And some of our people that were supposed to vote with us get dome disease. And it amazes me. And our people, some of them very close to me, voted against us having a debate at the AGM, and we lost it. So we weren't able to do it. So we have to understand that even when we elect people that are supposed to represent us, they seem to get amnesia the minute they get there, because this is what happens. They vote for themselves and don't represent their people. Now, Dennis and I went to the prayer meeting here in Edmonton Prayer Breakfast, and we remember a minister, and I don't remember who he is, so I'm not going to pretend to remember. He got up and said basically this. He said, you know, we're elected, we're government, and we're going to make the decisions. What do you think of that? Right? That is exactly what he said. This is the problem. The problem is that that's what they do. That's why we can't let them be. That's why you got to talk to your MLA, and that's why we have to show up and we have to show them who we are, that we exist. Because they actually firmly believe that. And we have to turn that pyramid upside down. I'm going to tell you this, it's not out of school. My MLA is terrified of our board. And he should be. Because they will threaten his existence. We have to get on CA boards because we're all conservatives and we have to participate in our democracy. So the best way to do it is to control your backyard. We can't control what goes on in Ottawa for sure, but we can control what goes on in Edmonton because they live right with us. I talk to my MLA all the time, and you know, Scott's been doing a credible job. I'm not angry with him at all, but he totally understands that when he comes to a board meeting with our CA board, he represents us. And he's actually quite unique in thinking that way. I would suggest out of 47 or 48 of those MLAs, you could pick maybe 4 or 5 that actually think that they're not there to represent what they think is best for their constituency. So just keep that in mind and know that we have a lot of work to do. What we're doing, with our democracy is basically the equivalent of, as far as I'm concerned as a businessman, would be I would open the door on day 1, I'd throw the keys to my staff, and then I'd walk away for 4 years. And that's basically what we're doing as electors. Because we don't talk to them except to vote. So talk to them, send them emails, send them handwritten letters, phone them, they don't like that. And that's the path towards succeeding at anything. All right? Thanks. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I am going to give the official last word to Max in just a moment. But before I say that, if anybody really likes helping stack up chairs, you're welcome to chip in. And please visit the merchandise and membership tables at the back of the room. Max, did you have something you wanted to share? Yes.
May I have 30 seconds for your attention? So this is a live stream, and I share, so I'm actually around freedomcanada.net. It's a website for events like My Limited People, and I was doing the Lovecast and the sound. If you want to see, because I've seen some people trying to record with their cell phones and everything. First of all, there's no need to do that. If you see the signs on their side, on the side, and on the exit, there's a QR code that you can scan, and that's where the live stream is. We have 350 people watching online, which is awesome. But I just want to ask you to scan the QR code, take a picture, and share with your friends. I know there are some people who were sick, some people who could not attend for a plethora of reasons, but the event was recorded. And thanks for coming. Thanks for the APP team to come to organizing this event, and have yourself a nice day.
Thank you, and good night.